Hey guys, what's up? Nick here once again, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 favorite games to play on the Steam Deck OLED, at least as of right now. I've been absolutely in love with my Steam Deck OLED since it launched and since I got it in my hands, and I really didn't think it would be that much of an upgrade over the original. However, I have been more than proven wrong since getting it in my hands here, and I just wanted to go over some games that I've been enjoying very much so since getting this device. If you're new to the channel, I have had the original Steam Deck for over a year, so some of these games I actually have played on my other Steam Deck in the past and had a really good time with it. I just transferred it over to my OLED. However, there's a couple titles on here that I've added to my collection because of the OLED, because they just run so much better and smoother on this new OLED display. If you're wondering why my overview may look a little bit different than yours does if you have it all default, the reason for that is because I have the Decky plugins installed. That's also why you might see some different colors and stuff in here. That's 100% due to the Decky plugin. If you want to know how to install that, just Google Decky plugin. It's super simple. It takes literally 5 minutes, and then you can go through and install a ton of different things here from the community to make your experience on the Steam Deck that much better. Anyhow, let's get into it. So starting out at my first game here, and this is not going to be in necessarily any order. I'm just going to go over 10 games that I play the most on my OLED and that I want to show you guys that still work really good on the Steam Deck, even if they're not even said that they're supported by Steam themselves. So the first one actually is Flatout Ultimate Carnage. If you guys have never played Flatout in the past, essentially it's a racing game with some destruction derby elements, and they also have the ability to fly out of your vehicle if you crash hard enough. It's hilarious and fun as it sounds, and it's an amazing game series, highly recommended. Ultimate Carnage, however, is my favorite in the series because it took everything that was great about Flatout 2 and just made it that much better with a new engine for the Xbox 360 at the time, and it looks great still to this day. It plays wonderfully and has a ton of features, a ton of extra game modes, and a lot of content. Now again, this one off the bat does state that it's not supported by Steam, but even though it says unsupported, you actually can play this on the Steam Deck if you go into the manual settings here. We go to properties, we go down to compatibility, and you force the use of a specific Steam Play compatibility tool, and you make sure that Proton of the newest version is selected. Now, if you do not have the GE Proton already, you will have to figure out a way to download that through the desktop version of the Steam Deck. I'm not going to get into that here because it is a little bit convoluted, but it is pretty easy to do. So once you've gotten that installed, make sure you have that selected under the compatibility, and this game will launch with no issues whatsoever. So we're going to boot it up here, give you guys some gameplay, and I'll talk a little bit more about the game and the settings that I run it at. One little funny thing about this game, and this is probably the reason it does not launch natively, you do have to use the GE form of Proton, is because of this window that pops up. Just every single time, there's no way to get rid of this. It just asks you, like, what settings do you want to run at. I leave it all default, and I just hit OK. And you do have to use the touchscreen. You can't use the controls, sadly, for that. Alright, getting into the game here, we have Flatout Ultimate Carnage running pretty flawlessly at 90 frames per second at 90 Hz. Because if you guys didn't know, the OLED does go up to 90 Hz now over the 60 Hz of the original, and it does make a large difference. It's funny that Valve really isn't marketing that at all with the OLED, even though I think it's honestly the biggest upgrade next to just the OLED colors is the refresh rate. And this game runs beautifully. Like I stated, at 90. I haven't had to really change any settings or anything of the sort within the game. I have it running at pretty much high settings or whatever the highest you can go. And yes, this is an older title, so it's not super surprising that it runs as good as it does without any hiccups or issues. Thankfully, it's not happening right now, but I have noticed on certain levels, on the edges of the display, you might see a little bit of flickering, or actually you are seeing it right here. You might notice a little bit of like a rainbow effect. It's nothing that's game-breaking or takes me away out of the experience, but it is noticeable, and it's only with this title. Again, it must be a glitch with maybe using this version of Proton. It's hard to say, but that is something that I noticed the other day, and I was kind of like, that's really weird. But other than that, the game has had no crashes, no issues, and this is by far one of my favorite racing games of all time. And it is extremely difficult, by the way. I am playing it live here. This is not pre-recorded. So I probably am doing terrible, but yeah, this is a very difficult game, but it's a lot of fun. Highly recommended if you haven't checked out any of the Flatout series. This is a great one to start at because you get a lot of content for a very cheap price. And like I stated, it still looks really good for an Xbox 360 title that is ported to PC. It plays really nice, controls really well, And if you guys are curious, I'm using my DualShock 5 controller here to play off screen. You don't have to see my grubby hands on the controls or pick up the system, so you guys get the best viewing angles possible. But yeah, this is Flatout Ultimate Carnage. Like I stated, I'm not using any special settings here in the Steam Deck either. I don't have any scaling filters. I don't have any scaling modes. Not using the manual GPU clock. And again, I'm using it 90 FPS, 90 Hertz. And it runs beautiful. So yeah, Flatout Ultimate Carnage, highly recommended. Next on my list is Madden 23. This was another game that actually did not launch right at the beginning, even though this one does not say it's unsupported. It does say it's playable. I wish that someone would come in here and update some of these. I know there's a ton of games out there for Steam to go through and essentially verify if it works or it does not work on the Steam Deck. But I think with the launch of the OLED, they really need to go back and reevaluate some of these titles that they early on gave it a pass or a no pass. And for Madden 23, it works flawlessly on the Steam Deck, but you do have to open it up in desktop mode first because you do have to install the EA launcher and you have to go through those settings to log into your EA account for this to work. However, once you've done that, now from every single time you launch the game, you can launch it from the game mode and you will not have any issues. On top of that, you don't have to use Proton versions or anything like that. You just use whatever is the default and Madden will launch without a hiccup. Alright, so once you get to the main menu here, I just want to show you a quick glimpse at the settings I am currently running at for my game here. So running it at the full resolution of 1280 by 800 full screen, and we have VSync turned off, triple buffering turned off, DirectX 11, or sorry, 12 is the version. And then I pretty much went in a custom but turned everything off essentially and put everything at low because you guys know with Madden and NBA games, the last like 5-10 years, they pretty much use the same engine and just convert everything to the next game. And it really has not had a significant graphical update in many years. So running this on low, you really can't tell the difference between high and low on this game. So let's put everything at low and we'll jump into the game here and see what kind of performance we get. One weird thing about Madden though, which sucks, is because it has to use the EA launcher, you do have to have an internet connection to play this game. I have tried booting it up in offline mode and it just will not launch. It won't get into the game at all, so you do need a constant internet connection for Madden, which is a big bummer. But once you're in the game, it runs pretty well. I did lock it at a 45 FPS lock, mainly because on the Steam Deck OLED, it does still keep you at 90 Hertz at a 45 FPS. So it feels a little bit smoother than in the past when it would resort to 60 Hertz at 45 FPS on the original Steam Deck. So good to see that they kept that where you do get an increase in the refresh rate. Other than that, though, everything else is default. And again, let's get back into the game here, and we'll check and see how it performs. Alright, you all know that was kind of bullshit, but whatever. Alright, back to the game here. So from my experience with Madden, it does have a few stutters here and there throughout the gameplay, but it's mostly during the menus. So you'll see it kind of drop from 45 up here during these like little cutscenes and when you're picking your play. But in actual playtime, without having the FPS counter up on the screen, it's pretty hard to notice. At least I don't really notice it. But actual in the game here, when you're running the play, which got intercepted, nice. When you're running the play, you don't really notice those drops or those hiccups. So that's why I leave it at 45 FPS cap, not only to save battery life, but because this game doesn't really get above 50 FPS all that often. It fluctuates pretty constantly. So you will notice those stutters a lot more often if you're not running it at 90 Hertz with a 45 FPS cap. So that's what I recommend. It plays really well. I've played over three matches now on the Steam Deck without an issue or a hiccup. And it's just a lot of fun to have this on the go. I just wish that you could play it without internet connection. That's the biggest issue in my opinion. So maybe one day someone will come out with some type of mod or something you can download to where you can play it offline. But for now, it needs a constant internet connection, but it does work really well on the Steam Deck. Next up on the list is Hades. Now this one, I have to admit, I just recently got into. I've only played like an hour of gameplay of this one, but I am absolutely loving it. It's a lot of fun. I know this one, I think, won Game of the Year when it came out, or it was at least nominated. But this game is a lot of fun. It plays really extremely well on the Steam Deck, and it looks beautiful with the OLED display. So a lot of dark and rich colors in this game that just really accentuate with that OLED. I don't have to change any settings. I think I'm running everything at the highest it can go, if I remember right, or at least from what you can change. Let's see, display settings, full screen. We do have VSync enabled. We're running at full resolution. I don't have any settings change within the Steam settings either. Everything is default. And this game runs at a buttery smooth 90 FPS at 90 Hertz. But this is probably one of the best looking games that I have played on the Steam Deck OLED to date. It's just with that beautiful art style and the colors that just pop out at you with that OLED display. And running at 90 FPS is definitely no slouch either. But yeah, Hades is a lot of fun. It's pretty cool. I'm not an expert at it by any means. Again, I'm still getting used to it. But it's been one of the best running games that I've seen on this console, and it's a lot of fun to play on the go. Because thankfully, it doesn't need a constant internet connection. I don't know why so many games need that or require that these days. Alright, so that's been Hades, running on the Steam Deck OLED. Highly recommended. Next up is the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. This is just a classic, man. I mean, Spyro the Dragon is an amazing series of games. I love them as a kid, and the remake is no slouch whatsoever. It's absolutely one of my favorite remakes I've ever seen. Plays really well, and it's a beautiful, gorgeous game. Absolutely cannot get enough of it. And being able to play it on the go like this on a handheld is just so dang fun. I toned down my lights a little bit, so hopefully you can see the camera or the screen just a little bit better. I noticed in the previous few games that it just looked a little bit washed out. It's really hard to show you guys exactly what it looks like in person, mainly because OLED displays just are never going to be captured correctly on a camera, especially a camera that's shooting at, I think this is like 60 Hertz. I don't really know what my camera shoots at, but you're not going to see the same image quality that I'm seeing in person, sadly, but I'm trying to make it the best quality experience that I can. All right, so now we're in the game. I'm running everything at high settings. So if we go into the graphic settings here, full screen, full resolution, unlimited FPS, VSync is turned off, motion blur is off, of course. But yes, graphic quality is on high, the high preset, so whatever that sets everything to. And then I put it at a 45 FPS lock because, again, it still runs at 90 Hertz. It's just at 45 FPS. And in person, I mean, it's super smooth. You really don't notice a big difference between 45 FPS and 60. So that's why I recommend leaving it at this, mainly because you get less stutters, less hiccups, and it still saves battery life on top of that. So yeah, 45 FPS I think is the way to go. This game looks gorgeous, and having it at high settings on this handheld is just unmatched. Very much recommended. And it's a lot of fun to play on the go. I 100%ed the very first title, and now I've moved on to Ripto's Rage. So you can say I'm having a pretty good time with this game, and I absolutely love this series. If you've never played the original Spyros, the Reignited Trilogy is the definitive edition by far. So it's pretty much everything that made the originals great, just better graphics, amazing colors, great voice acting, everything. It's so much better. It's an amazing experience. Highly recommended. All right, we're in GTA 5 for the next game. This one doesn't really need an introduction. You guys know GTA 5. It's been around for forever at this point, and it runs amazing on the Steam Deck OLED, just as it did on the original Steam Deck. GTA 5, you can run this game at pretty much high settings and get pretty decent FPS. It does go above 60 for most of the point, but I'm just a person that hates stuttering. I hate anything when it drops below 60 FPS. You really can notice those dips. So, to counteract that, I did put a 45 FPS stop on this one as well, just like I did with the previous games, and it runs flawlessly at 45 FPS. With the OLED, once again, it does cap it at 90 Hertz instead of capping it down at 60 Hertz, so it just looks incredibly smooth. Even though you're playing at a 45, you'd be hard-pressed to tell that this does not feel like 60 FPS. Now, I know on camera it's not doing its justice at all, but I can tell you in person, it looks extremely smooth. It runs great. You won't have any stutters whatsoever throughout the entire game. And I'm running it at high specs. So let's see. We've go into the settings here just to show you guys what we're running it at the moment. We're running it at full resolution, full screen, DirectX 1190 Hertz. VSync turned off, of course. Population density, variety, and distance scaling are at about 30%. Have everything at normal to very high to high. So not like, you know, full specs, but it's relatively high specs, and the game still looks wonderful on this display, especially on the OLED. When you're driving at night, this game is gorgeous. But yeah, you can play through the entire story mode and GTA Online on the Steam Deck without much of an issue. So that's why it's definitely one of my favorite games to pick up and play, and why I still love playing it on the go to this day, because it just runs that great. And when you also lock it at 45 FPS, you are going to get much better battery life compared to running it at uncapped, because you're going to get, like I said, more stutters that way, and you're going to be using a lot more battery power. And you're going to go from, like, if we're at a full charge, right now we're at 39% battery, and we're still seeing about an hour and a half left of gameplay. But if I was to bump this up to an uncapped FPS, that would drop down to like 35 minutes left. It makes a pretty big difference. So yeah, GTA 5, awesome game, highly recommended for the Steam Deck. Next up on my list is Ghostrunner, the very first one. Now the second one has been confirmed to be verified for the Steam Deck, so I'm sure that one runs just as great. However, after playing through both games, I have to say I do prefer the first game a lot more, but we're not going to go into that here. That being said, Ghostrunner is a gorgeous game that runs flawlessly on the Steam Deck at 90 FPS with no stuttering, no lag, and it looks gorgeous on the OLED display. So if we were to go in the settings here just to show you what I'm running it at, go into video, it is a little bit small, so I do apologize on this display. We are running AMD FSR 1.0. We are at ultra quality setting. We have everything set to relatively medium to low specs. Nothing too crazy. VSync is turned off. Ray tracing, of course, is turned off. And our field of view is bumped up to 110, but otherwise everything else is default. And I am not running an FPS cap on this game, as you can see here. So let's jump into the game and see how she looks. We are relatively about an hour into the game right now, and I gotta admit, playing on controller is a lot different of an experience playing it on PC with a mouse and keyboard. I much prefer the mouse and keyboard, but I've gotten used to the controls now of the controller to where I'm not totally terrible. But Ghostrunner, as you can see, runs flawlessly on the Steam Deck. It looks gorgeous. It's an amazing game. If you've never played this game, highly recommend checking it out. And of course, on the go with the Steam Deck, it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging, but it's very rewarding at the same time. But yeah, so this is Ghostrunner 1. As you can see, running 90 FPS pretty flawlessly. You might see a couple dips below 90 here and there, but as long as it stays above 60, I've noticed you will never notice those dips unless you're hounding the FPS counter. So yeah, this game is incredibly great in terms of its performance on the Steam Deck. It's also kind of a bummer. I did have to turn off the music for this recording because the soundtrack is copyrighted, but this game is literally one of the best in-game soundtracks I've ever heard in my life. I absolutely love the Ghostrunner soundtrack. Just a side note I wanted to add there. The next game on my list here is Resident Evil Village, aka Resident Evil 8. Now this game actually really surprised me with how well it ran on the original Steam Deck back when it first came out, and it's no slouch here on the OLED, if not a little bit better. And what's just funny, because both this game and the Resident Evil 4 remake run on the same engine, but the remake of Resident Evil 4 just doesn't run that well on the Steam Deck, at least in my experience. It is certified by Steam, it does launch, it does run, but you get a lot of stuttering, and it definitely does not go above 45 FPS, at least in my testing. So I was astonished to see that with Village, that is not the case at all. So I am running it at a 60 FPS cap this time at 60 Hz, just because with this game, and you will notice this with certain titles, where running it at 45 FPS for the most part will get the job done, but you might notice that it is a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it, just not as smooth. And Village is definitely one of those games where you will notice that difference from 45 to 60 FPS. But thankfully, running it at 60 Hz, 60 FPS, it runs beautifully. Pretty much no stutters whatsoever, at least in my testing. So let's jump into the game here. I think I just got to the castle in this new playthrough, and I'll give you guys an example of what it looks like in-game with the current settings, and again with the current FPS at 60. So we're in the castle at the moment here, and let's check out which settings we are running it at right now. So we are running it at non-HDR. I know this does have an HDR display, and certain games do look better with HDR enabled, but for me personally, I think the game looks a little brighter and better without HDR on, but that could just be my eyes. Running it at full screen, full resolution. It is set to refresh rate of 90 Hz in-game, but again, with the Steam settings, we are having it at 60 Hz. We have variable refresh rate, VSync turned off. We do have this set to ultra quality with the FSR enabled. And then everything else I think is relatively mid to high. So texture quality is high, filter quality is high, mesh quality mid. So yeah, most stuff is pretty much medium to high settings, which again is pretty remarkable that this runs at so well at 60 FPS on a handheld gaming system. So we're gonna go out here to the main hall. We're gonna run around. I don't know if I can go through here yet. Yep. We will have a cutscene coming up, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick glimpse of what this game looks like on the Steam Deck and running at 60 FPS, 60 Hertz. And if you're wondering, like, is it a big difference going from 90 Hertz to back to 60 Hertz? Not entirely. Yes, it is noticeable. Like, if I were to switch this to 90 Hertz, it will look a little smoother. However, the FPS will kind of fluctuate a lot more than on 60 Hertz here, and thus you will actually have a less smooth experience. It's really hard to explain, but unless you're getting 90 FPS, leaving it at 90 Hertz, it just does not look that good if you're getting above 60 FPS. So I know it's kind of convoluted, doesn't really make much sense, but just trust me on this one. Leaving it at 60 FPS, 60 Hertz is by far the best way to go, and it looks the best. And like I said, the OLED panel on this thing is gorgeous, man. Like, everything looks so damn good. I really wish it could be shown on camera for you guys. I really do. It's just something you'll have to see in person, or just take my word for it. So this is Resident Evil 8 running on the Steam Deck OLED. Absolutely amazing title, a lot of fun. I've replayed this game so many times I've literally lost count, so highly recommended. Let's move on to the next one.
You are so kind to me, daughters. Now, let's take a look at him.
And next on our list here is Forza 5. I've never been a huge Forza Horizon fan. I've played a couple of them in the past, but I never was like really hooked on them until I got the Steam Deck. And I think that a lot of it has to do with how gorgeous this game looks and just how well it runs on such a small handheld. And the races are a lot of fun. I like the vehicles in this game. Honda Civic Type R, of course, one of my favorites. So yeah, I've been absolutely loving the performance of this game on the Steam Deck. I've tried a few different options here and you can kind of mess around with this any way, shape, or form, whichever one feels the best for you. But in the end, my experience actually has gotten better with turning off FSR. I know this might sound kind of crazy, but I actually get a little bit better performance without FSR enabled, and it just looks a little bit better anyway. So this could just be me, I don't really know, but from my experience, I get a lot less hiccups, a lot less stutters with FSR turned off. Running it, I think, at low settings. Let me verify this though for you guys. So we're gonna go into our graphics settings. Yes, so we are on the low preset, which again, on this display, if you are to bump it up to a larger display through a docking station, it might be beneficial to up this to medium settings, but for now, I'm on low. And then in my video settings, I have it at full resolution, frame rate at 90 FPS, we have VSync turned off, and again, I am not using the AMD FSR at the moment, and I am running it at a cap of 45 FPS, 90 Hertz. So, with those settings enabled, but you will notice from time to time some dips below 45, but it is relatively rare. It's mostly when you're in these city environments and there's a lot of stuff for it to load in. But when you're in an actual race, I literally I'm hard pressed to find any slowdowns, especially when I'm not hounding the FPS counter, because I normally turn it off when I'm just playing the game. I just have it on for these videos. So yeah, in my experience, this is the way to play it because it just looks a lot sharper. Now, if I was to go in here and turn on FSR, yes, you might get a little bit better FPS. I'm not saying you won't, but the sharpness is so limited that it just, for me personally, is not worth it. So let's just leave it on quality mode, AMD FSR. We're going to save and continue. And we'll see if there's much of a difference here. Again, I'm still leaving the locked at FPS. So already, yeah, you can really tell the sharpness has gone down. The biggest thing for me is if I try to read the license plate while I'm driving, you'll notice it will fluctuate in sharpness. And it's kind of noticeable. I've also noticed some weird graphical glitches. And let me know in the comment section below if you play Forza 5 on the Steam Deck with FSR enabled, because for some reason, there will be graphical glitches in the mountains and stuff where you'll just see some random white flashing. And it really is noticeable and annoying. And even though we have FSR enabled, you'll notice the FPS is fluctuating. Sometimes it does go down to 35, sometimes it does go down to 41. There will be those little hiccups. So that's why, if the way I look at it is like, if I'm getting fluctuations anyway, even with FSR enabled, I might as well just stick with no FSR and have a much better looking experience. So that's why, for me, my personal recommendation is just turn FSR all the way off, use it at full resolution, and just have it on low settings. And you're going to get a relatively decent experience as long as you have the FPS count or capped at 45 with the 90 hertz refresh rate. Because yeah, it's a very smooth experience even at 45 FPS. This is one of those titles that you don't notice a difference between 60 FPS and 40, at least in my opinion. So yeah, Forza 5 is a gorgeous game. It runs really well, and I've played a lot of races on the go with this Steam Deck and with this game, and I could not recommend it enough if you're into arcade racing. Now that we're coming down to the wire here on our games list, number 9 is Burnout Paradise, the Ultimate Edition. I do not believe this is the remastered version. I know there's 2 versions on Steam, and I believe they removed this one, sadly, so there's no way to actually get this version unless you get the remastered. And I have heard there's a lot of issues with the remastered version, so take this with a grain of salt. If I'm telling you to go out and get Burnout Paradise, sadly, I don't know if you're going to get the same experiences as me unless you've already purchased this game in the past. But with that being said, this is another game that does not say it's supported by Steam, and it will not launch. However, I didn't even have to change anything or even go into the compatibility to make sure that it launched with Proton or anything like that. This is just straight vanilla game. I booted it up first try, and it worked immediately. So we're just going to go to play Burnout Paradise Ultimate Box. Don't ask me again because I don't need to go in the configuration settings or anything like that. And it should boot up first time. I will say, I'll give a little disclaimer here, if you have this game and you try booting it up and it does not work for the first time, try going into the desktop mode first, booting it up, and seeing if possibly it's trying to launch the EA launcher. And if that's the case, once you've done it one time through the desktop mode, then from then on you can go every single time through the game mode and it'll launch just like this, no problem. And jumping into Burnout Paradise here, as you can see, this game is running flawlessly at 60 FPS. Now, the one thing I will state with this game is that it does have a 60 FPS cap enabled internally. There's no way to change that, no way to set that up or make it higher, sadly. So what I recommend is going into the Steam settings, actually putting it at a 60 FPS, 60 Hz cap. Don't leave it at default. The main reason for that is the battery life. You will save significant amount of battery life just by lowering it to 60 FPS, 60 Hz. And trust me, with older titles like this, you will not notice a difference whatsoever. So you might as well do it for the better battery life. And I know there are certain games where if you have it at 60 FPS, 90 Hz, it will create micro stutters and stuff like that. I didn't notice any differences with the performance, but I just would do it for the battery life alone. So take it with a grain of salt. The other thing to take with a grain of salt, like I stated already, is this might be a different version than the one you can get currently on Steam. So I don't know if that one will launch without any tinkering. But if you do have the original version, the non-remastered version on Steam, in your Steam library, even though it is not supported, I highly recommend giving this game a try. This is probably one of my favorite arcade races of all time, next to Burnout 3. So it's a lot of fun to play on the go. It runs flawlessly. You're never going to see any dips below 60. At least in my experience, I'm about like an hour, 2 hours into the game so far, and I have yet to have any experiences of issues, crashes, lag, you name it. It's a beautiful game. It still holds up to this day, it looks gorgeous, and it runs amazing on the Steam Deck OLED. So yeah, another game that is highly recommended. Alrighty, so for this last one, it's a little bit of a cop-out, I'm not gonna lie, but it's just emulation in general. I have so many games that, as you can see here, that I've emulated on the Steam Deck, and every single one runs really, really great. Every single title that you could think of that you can emulate with EmuDeck makes it so easy. It's just easy as can be. Like, you just download the program, you download your ROMs, and you're good to go. You don't really have to worry about much. You will have to get some BIOS for certain titles, like the PS2 emulator needs certain BIOS and the PS1 emulator, but that stuff's super easy if you've emulated anything in the past, and you know where to get your ROMs and all that stuff too. So once you've gotten your ROMs installed in EmuDeck, they show up in Steam. They bring in the album art and everything ready to go, and it easily and nicely organizes it for you, as you can see here. Now, I did not have any issues emulating with the original Steam Deck, and it is no slouch here. because like I stated, like you can pretty much have any game that you can think of from back in the day on the go whenever you want, and it looks gorgeous on this new OLED display. And jumping into one of the games here, this is MotorStorm Arctic Edge playing on the PS2 emulator. They did actually port this game to the PSP as well, and that was the one I played the most growing up. I never had the PS2 version, but it does run a little bit better on the PS2, and then the controls are a little bit better as well, so that's why I got that version for the emulator. Now, this game will have some stutters here and there. As you can see, it's going to dip below 50 even at some points, which is kind of an annoyance. But I've noticed that's just this game. Like, it was like that on the PSP as well. Never could get it working properly in terms of just a buttery smooth experience. However, if you're not caring about the FPS, the game is still a lot of fun and it runs great. And most titles that I've played on the PS2 emulator are running at 60 FPS without any issue or hiccup whatsoever. But what I do recommend with games like this, just like I was talking about with Burnout Paradise, don't leave it at the default 90 Hertz, mainly because, again, these games are not going to get up to 90 FPS. They actually have a cap built in at 60. So what I recommend is just dropping it down to 60 FPS, 60 Hertz, and the games are going to look a little bit smoother and they're going to run a little bit better. And again, you're going to have a lot better battery life in the end. So it's just a better experience, and it's really much highly recommended. So if you ever see a game that's capped at 60, you never see it go above 60, there's really no point at leaving it at 90 Hertz because you're just wasting battery life at that point. And again, you can lead to micro stutters and stuff like that and just worse performance overall. So, yeah. Emulation is amazing as always. EmuDeck is amazing as always. And that's why it's my number 10 most played games, I should say, plural, on the Steam Deck OLED. Alrighty, so those are my 10 most played games on the Steam Deck OLED. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. What I would like to see from you guys in the comment section below is let me know your top 10 games that you like playing on your Steam Deck. It doesn't have to be the OLED version, by the way. It can be the regular Steam Deck as well. Just let me know what you guys are playing, and I might check them out for a future video. I also will be having a full video review of the Steam Deck OLED coming very soon, so be on the lookout for that. But with that, leave a like, share, support as always. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We'll hopefully see you in the next one, everybody. Peace out.